Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is now less than a year away, and it's been a while since I did any videos on the film, partly due to not having any new updates on it and just waiting to see more from it. Back before Oppenheimer came out, I did a few videos talking about how Nolan might adapt that project from the book that it was based on. But now looking ahead and thinking about the Odyssey film, I thought I'd do the same, having read both Homer's The Iliad and The Odyssey. So in this video, I'm going to try and picture what the opening scene of The Odyssey will be and how Christopher Nolan might film it for the big screen. There are rumours and details that have come out about this scene, and I will be addressing them as well. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey film, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into how Christopher Nolan might approach the opening scene in his Odyssey movie. So in the Odyssey story, the Siege of Troy is never told as a full continuous story the way it is in the Iliad. Instead, it appears in fragments of memory and song recalled by different characters as they reflect on the past. We learn that the Greeks fought for 10 long years outside of Troy's walls, suffering heavy losses, until Odysseus' clever plan brought the war to an end. In Menelaus' and Nestor's accounts, we hear of the grief that lingered after so many companions were lost. The clearest retelling comes in Book 8 of the Odyssey, when the bard Demodocus sings for Odysseus and describes the decisive stratagem. He tells how the Greeks, worn out from years of stalemate, built a giant wooden horse and filled it with their strongest fighters. The rest of the Greek army pretended to sail away, leaving the horse as an offering to the gods. The opposition, known as the Trojans, were fooled by this trick and dragged the horse into their city and rejoiced as if the war was over. But as night fell, the hidden Greek warriors crept out of the horse's belly, silently striking down the guards and opening the gates. At that same moment, the rest of the Greek forces returned from their hiding place at sea and rushed through the gates of Troy. In the chaos that followed, Troy was sacked, its houses burned, and its people slaughtered or enslaved. It marked both the end of one story and the beginning of another. On one hand, the sacking is the Greeks' great triumph, the result of Odysseus' cunning invention of the Trojan horse, which finally broke the stalemate after 10 years of bloody war. That cleverness establishes Odysseus' reputation as a strategist, a man whose intelligence can outmatch brute strength. Yet on the other hand, the sack is also the seed of everything that follows. The brutality of the Greeks' victory in burning temples, killing innocents, and desecrating sacred spaces angers the gods, especially Poseidon and Athena at times, and this divine wrath sets the stage for Odysseus' long cursed voyage home. For Odysseus personally, the sack of Troy is both his proudest achievement and his heaviest burden, because it makes him a hero in the eyes of men, but guilty in the eyes of the gods. For the story as a whole, it is the hinge between war and wandering, and between glory and suffering. Without Troy's fall, there would be no long journey across the sea, no encounters with monsters, no desperate yearning for home. It is the haunting memory of that shadows every stage of Odysseus' Odyssey. The sacking of Troy becomes even more meaningful in the Odyssey because other characters remember it in very different ways too, and those perspectives shape how we understand the cost of war. For instance, Agamemnon's memory of Troy is bitter and tragic. When Odysseus meets him in the underworld, Agamemnon recalls not only the war but the betrayal that followed, as it's known that after returning home victorious, he was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra. For him, the sack of Troy feels hollow, a victory that led straight into ruin. His warning to Odysseus in being cautious when returning to Ithaca shows how the war scarred even its leaders and poisoned their homecomings. Menelaus, by contrast, remembers Troy as the moment of reunion with Helen. For him, the sacking of Troy restores what was lost, yet his journey afterwards is marked by wandering and hardship at sea. His perspective highlights how victory came at an enormous cost, not only in blood but in years stolen from the lives of those who fought. And there's also Nestor, who offers a more nostalgic, almost reverent memory. As an elder statesman, he looks back on the war as a time of great deeds and fallen comrades. For him, the sacking of Troy is a solemn reminder of bravery and loss, and his telling gives both the war a sense of grandeur and underscores the generational trauma it left behind. So together, these different perspectives remind us that Troy's fall is not a single glorious event, but a wound that every survivor carries differently. In The Odyssey, the sack of Troy is less about military victory and more about memory, trauma, and the fragile line between glory and ruin. Now, we've seen a lot of set photos in the past for The Odyssey of the Trojan horse and also more images of Troy which Nolan has appeared to have constructed in 8 Ben Haddou in Morocco. On top of all this, it was reported that Nolan and co filmed a Troy battle at night with only a few images of it being seen online. At the time, Universal blocked footage and images from this battle scene, and it was heavily rumoured that this sequence would be Nolan's opening prologue scene for his Odyssey movie. Now, knowing Christopher Nolan, it's likely that the opening scene would be less of a straightforward retelling and more of a fractured, time-bending introduction to Odysseus' journey. So having it start during the sacking of Troy would make a lot of sense. Essentially, it would be an action-packed prologue that introduces us to Odysseus, but then also sets in motion the moment that the Odyssey builds on from. After this opening, you could then cut forward and back in time to tell the complete Odyssey story through the multiple sequences that we expect. Whether that's Odysseus' central journey, the scenes with Telemachus, or the moments with Penelope and her struggles in Ithaca. So yeah, based on all of that set footage, the rumours, and the positioning of Troy in the timeline, I think it's highly likely that the opening scene of the film will be Nolan's take on the sacking of Troy. With all this said, how do I think Christopher Nolan will adapt and film this scene to make it an effective one on the big screen? Well, if Christopher Nolan were to stage the sacking of Troy in The Odyssey, I think it would unfold as a tense, fragmented crescendo rather than a traditional battle sequence. I think it would likely begin with a lot of tension, possibly opening on eerie shots from within and outside of the massive wooden horse looming inside Troy's walls at dusk. Using an uneasy score in the background, presumably a ticking clock, the camera could linger on the Trojan citizens celebrating, children running around the horse, and the soldiers holding their weapons. We could cross-cut inside the horse to Odysseus and the opposite side as they listen on to Trojan music. Nolan would likely emphasise both the claustrophobia for Odysseus and his men and the impending doom for the Trojans outside. So from this, the audience could really feel the unbearable tension of waiting. The narrative might then cut to the final of the 3 strands in this opening scene, showing the Greek fleet silently rowing back under the cover of night. All 3 perspectives would come together and explode the minute the warriors slip out of the horse's belly. Guards are killed in silence, gates are opened, and the Greeks begin to pour in. Here, Nolan would unleash a moment of chaos as fire spreads across the city in long sweeping shots, warriors clash in torchlit alleys, and families suffer as their homes collapse. The editing would intercut this footage between large-scale destruction, which was evident in the set footage, and then intimate moments of horror too. And at the centre of all of it is Odysseus, who moves like a ghost, calm and deliberately, with his intelligence contrasting the madness all around him. Furthermore, Nolan would not simply present this sacking as a victory. I think the very shot that will follow this sacking of Troy scene will be the one from the exclusive theatre trailer where Odysseus is seen broken and haunted by the memories at sea years later. The sacking of Troy in this telling then will become not just the Greeks' triumph, but the traumatic origin of everything that follows. Essentially, an echoing wound that shapes Odysseus' long journey home. I think back to a film like Christopher Nolan's own one with Dunkirk, where the director showed simultaneous perspectives, like with the land, sea and air structure. He could essentially use that structure for just this opening scene. We get the 2 Greek perspectives from both inside the horse and those coming back to attack the Trojans, and then contrasting that with the Trojan perspective itself. As this mainly sets up our time with Odysseus years later, adrift at sea, the sacking of Troy would play with memory and trauma. Like we saw in the teaser trailer, waves will crash over Odysseus as he clings to a broken raft, and the sound of the storm blending seamlessly into the memory of Troy's destruction. Knowing Nolan, he could also maybe overlay these timelines as well, so that the audience feels the importance of all of it. The sacking is an important moment to capture because it's both the victory that secured Odysseus' legacy and the sin that cursed his journey home. Nolan could frame it as the centre of the story's temporal web, the one night where the consequences echo across all future timelines. Thinking about all of this, it gets me even more excited to see how this could translate to screen with the new IMAX technology that they've revealed and cameras that Nolan is going to be using on the film. Based on what's been said about the new IMAX cameras, the exceptional resolution and large format sensors would allow for a new level in balancing grandeur with intimacy. For instance, in the past, it's been difficult to shoot IMAX film with lots of dialogue. That's why many filmmakers switch formats during those moments, sometimes even mid-scene. If Nolan was to have a mixture of sweeping shots and battle dialogue in the opening scene, he can now do that with the new IMAX film cameras, and it's been said that the entire film is the first celluloid IMAX picture in history to shoot entirely on IMAX film. So there's the potential here with the filmmaking for something extremely special, and an opening scene focused on the Siege of Troy would be the perfect way to both showcase and set the tone for that. So overall, the new IMAX technology would not just make The Odyssey bigger and more epic visually, but also more immersive emotionally, letting audiences experience both the grandeur of ancient warfare and the intimate human struggles of Odysseus' journey with unprecedented clarity. But that was my video discussing the potential opening scene of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey and how the director might adapt it. Again, this is just me predicting and theorising based on what we've heard and seen from the production of the movie, and knowing Nolan, there's going to be a lot of things that I've missed out. But it is a lot of fun to think about, and I think it's also very exciting considering how epic Nolan seems to be going with the scene and also the rest of his fantasy film. The Siege of Troy is a standout moment in the entire story, even though it's told in an interesting way across both the Iliad and the Odyssey. The latter story remembers the war not through detailed battle scenes, but through its emotional and moral consequences. What stands out in the Odyssey is that Troy's siege is less about glory in combat and more about what came after. And that is the strange returns, the divine punishments, and the lasting scars on the survivors. In this way, the story of the siege becomes the background against which Odysseus' own struggles are set, reminding the audience that the fall of Troy was not an end, but the beginning of an even harder journey. So you could see why Nolan would want to open on such a crucial scene and show it in both a monumentally epic way and an intimate one too. We'll have to wait and see how the director will go about depicting this moment in the film, and I can't wait to see the first footage from it, likely in an attached prologue to the new Avatar film in theatres this December. But let me know down below in the comments section what you think the opening scene of The Odyssey will be, and how you think director Christopher Nolan will go about adapting it. For much more content on Christopher Nolan and his future projects, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.